Greetings in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. Let us continue our lesson titled The Importance of God's Words. This time, we will discuss the last two subtopics titled Learning from Moses' Mistake and Old Testament and New Testament Parallelisms. This will be the last part of the lesson titled The Importance of God's Words. In part 9 of this lesson, we have studied that lack of knowledge is very dangerous, not only in the secular realm, but more so in the spiritual realm. In part 9 of this lesson, we have also discussed about Moses' 100% obedience. I hope we still remember that incident where the Israelites quarreled with Moses because there was no water to drink. But the Lord, or Yahweh, or Jehovah, told Moses that he would stand before them in front of the rock, and he instructed Moses to strike the rock so that water would come out. Moses did it without adding or subtracting from that command, and everything was all right. In part 10 of this lesson, we will study the mistake of Moses and what very important lessons we can get from it. To help us better extract the very good lessons from Moses' mistake, we will learn first some of the parallelisms that exist between the Old Testament and the New Testament. These parallelisms can help us have a wider application of the things that we can learn from the mistake of Moses. Let us now study the second instance of the same no water problem. In the first instance, Moses did not commit any mistake because he struck the rock with his staff as God instructed him to do. In Numbers 20 verse 1 we can read, the Israelites, the whole congregation, came into the wilderness of Zin in the first month, and the people stayed in Kadesh. Miriam died there and was buried there. Please note that the Israelites arrived in the wilderness of Zin and they settled in Kadesh. In the first instance, the Israelites left the wilderness of Sin and they camped at Rephidim, as can be read in Exodus 17 verse 1. Clearly, these are two instances of similar problem. In Numbers 20 verse 2 we can read, now there was no water for the congregation, so they gathered together against Moses and against Aaron. They did not have water again to drink, and they quarreled with Moses and Aaron. They forgot that God gave them water during the first instance. In Numbers 20 verse 3 we can read, the people quarreled with Moses and said, would that we had died when our kindred died before the Lord. They wished they had died in Egypt rather than being in a place that was not what they expected. So they questioned Moses. In Numbers 20 verses 4 and 5 we can read, why have you brought the assembly of the Lord into this wilderness for us and our livestock to die here? Why have you brought us up out of Egypt to bring us to this wretched place? It is no place for grain, or figs, or vines, or pomegranates, and there is no water to drink. Again, the word Lord is rendered as Yahweh in the Community Christian Bible Catholic Pastoral Edition, and Jehovah in the New World Translation of the Holy Scriptures published by the Jehovah's Witnesses. In Numbers 20 verse 6 we can read, then Moses and Aaron went away from the assembly to the entrance of the tent of meeting. They fell on their faces, and the glory of the Lord appeared to them. Here Moses and Aaron left the people and bowed down at the entrance of their place of worship, and the glory of the Lord appeared to them. This Lord is Yahweh in the Catholic Pastoral Edition and Jehovah in the New World Translation. In Numbers 20 verses 7 and 8 we can read, the Lord spoke to Moses saying, take the staff and assemble the congregation, you and your brother Aaron, and command the rock before their eyes to yield its water. Thus you shall bring water out of the rock for them. Thus you shall provide drink for the congregation and their livestock. Please take note of God's new instruction to Moses and Aaron. What was God's new instruction to Moses and Aaron? They were instructed to command the rock. Some versions render the word command as speak, tell, or order. This is a new command. The old command was to strike the rock, as we can read in Exodus 17 verse 6. In Numbers 20 verse 9 we can read, so Moses took the staff from before the Lord as he had commanded him. Moses initially obeyed God as he was instructed. In Numbers 20 verse 10 we can read, Moses and Aaron gathered the assembly together before the rock, and he said to them, listen, you rebels, shall we bring water for you out of this rock? Again, Moses and Aaron complied with what God commanded them, that is, to gather the Israelites. But Moses was already angry with them, and he called the Israelites rebels. Then in Numbers 20, verse 11, we can read, Then Moses lifted up his hand and struck the rock twice with his staff. Water came out abundantly, and the congregation and their livestock drank. What did Moses do? He struck the rock twice. Was it the command of God? No, it was not the command of God. His new instruction was to command the rock. God's old instruction was to strike the rock. In other words, Moses used the old command of God rather than the new command of God. Even though Moses used the old command rather than the new command, water still came out abundantly, and the people and their livestock were able to drink some water. There seems to be nothing wrong with it. But in Numbers 20, verse 12, we can read, Then the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, Because you did not believe me, to hallow me in the eyes of the children of Israel, therefore you shall not bring this assembly into the land which I have given them. It is clear that God was not happy with Moses and Aaron. In fact, God declared a punishment for them. That is, they would not be allowed to enter the promised land. I hope we will learn from this mistake of Moses. This tells us that not doing exactly what God commanded us is not faith at all. Doing exactly what God commanded us is a demonstration of our genuine faith. Claiming to have faith in Christ, but not doing what Christ commanded us, is not a genuine faith. So, the faith that really saves is the faith that really works. As already mentioned, God told Moses and Aaron that they could not enter the promised land because of that mistake of Moses, as we can read in Numbers 20, verse 12. Let us study whether or not God was serious of his uttered punishment for Moses and Aaron. In the same chapter, Aaron died. In Numbers 20, verse 22, we can read, They set out from Kadesh, and the Israelites, the whole congregation, came to Mount Hor. When Israelites reached Mount Hor, God instructed Moses what to do with Aaron. In Numbers 20, verses 23 and 24, we can read, Then the Lord said to Moses and Aaron at Mount Hor, on the border of the land of Edom, Let Aaron be gathered to his people, for he shall not enter the land that I have given to the Israelites, because you rebelled against my command at the waters of Meribah. Aaron would die in Mount Hor without reaching the promised land because of that simple rebellion, that is, not doing what God commanded them to do. Was it just a joke? In Numbers 20, verses 25 to 26, we can read, Take Aaron and his son Eleazar, and bring them up Mount Hor. Strip Aaron of his vestment, and put them on his son Eleazar. But Aaron shall be gathered to his people, and shall die there. God told Moses that his brother Aaron would die. In Numbers 20, verses 27 to 28, we can read, Moses did as the Lord had commanded. They went up Mount Hor in the sight of the whole congregation. Moses stripped Aaron of his vestment and put them on his son Eleazar. And Aaron died there on the top of the mountain. Moses and Eleazar came down from the mountain. So God was really serious about his punishment. Aaron died without entering the promised land. Then in Numbers 20, verse 29, we can read, When all the congregation saw that Aaron had died, all the house of Israel mourned for Aaron 30 days. So it was not just a joke. Aaron really died without entering the promised land. I hope we will learn from this incident. After sharing this lesson for several years, one Bible student of mine asked me, Sir, how come that God punished Aaron, but it was Moses who committed the mistake? It was my first time to encounter such a question, but I got the lesson immediately upon hearing it. I told her, That's a good question, and I now have a good sermon to share this coming Sunday. Yes, that very Sunday, I made a sermon out of this. What is the lesson? The lesson is very simple. If we know the truth and we keep it to ourselves, then we are accountable to God. We have to remember that when God instructed Moses to command the rock, Aaron was there. The glory of the Lord appeared to Moses and Aaron when they fell prostrate at the entrance of the tent of meeting, as we can read in Numbers 20, verse 6. Aaron knew what God instructed Moses, as we can read in Numbers 20, verses 7 and 8. When Moses lifted up his staff before the rock to strike it, Aaron could have stopped Moses from doing so. He ought to say, Hey Moses, that is not what the Lord instructed you to do. Since Aaron did not do anything, Despite knowing what God instructed Moses, then Aaron was also accountable. I hope we have learned something about God's punishment for Aaron. I hope we should not keep the truth to ourselves. I hope we tell it even if it hurts, because the truth really hurts. I hope we tell others of their wrong practices in order to be released from our accountability before God. That is why some of my lessons are not the traditional ones. I shared the pure teachings of Christ and the apostles, even if they are unpopular to many people. I cannot keep the truth to myself. Let us now study whether or not God was serious about his punishment for Moses, considering that Aaron already died. In Deuteronomy 32, verses 48 to 49, we can read, "On that very day, the Lord addressed Moses as follows: Ascend this mountain of the Abarim, Mount Nebo, which is in the land of Moab, across from Jericho, and view the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the Israelites for a possession." Here Moses was told to climb Mount Nebo to view the promised land. Would God allow him to enter the land that he would view from Mount Nebo? In Deuteronomy 32, verses 50 to 51, we can read, "You shall die there on the mountain that you ascend, and shall be gathered to your kin, as your brother Aaron died on Mount Hor and was gathered to his kin, because both of you broke faith with me among the Israelites at the waters of Meribah Kadesh in the wilderness of Zin, by failing to maintain my holiness among the Israelites." God told Moses that he would die in that mountain, just like his brother Aaron, because they broke faith with the Lord. In Deuteronomy 32, verse 52, we can read, "Although you may view the land from a distance, you shall not enter it, the land that I am giving to the Israelites." God allowed Moses to view the promised land from a distance only, but he was not allowed to enter it. That verse, Deuteronomy 32, verses 48 to 52, was just God's instruction to Moses to climb the mountain and die there. Was God serious about it? Remember, Abraham was told to offer Isaac in Mount Moriah, as we can read in Genesis 22, verses 1 and 2. But when Abraham reached the place and was about to kill Isaac, as we can read in Genesis 22, verse 10 to 11, God stopped Abraham from killing his son, as we can read in Genesis 22, verse 12. Was it the same for Moses? Did he really die after climbing the mountain? In Deuteronomy 34, verses 1 to 3, we can read, "Then Moses went up from the plains of Moab to Mount Nebo, to the top of Pisgah, which is opposite Jericho. And the Lord showed him the whole land, Gilead as far as Dan, all Naphtali, the land of Ephraim and Manasseh, all the land of Judah as far as the western sea, the Negeb, and the plain, that is, the valley of Jericho, the city of palm trees, as far as Zor." Here Moses climbed Mount Nebo and was able to view the whole promised land. Would he really die? In Deuteronomy 34, verses 4 to 5, we can read, "The Lord said to him, This is the land of which I swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, saying, I will give it to your descendants. I have let you see it with your eyes, but you shall not cross over there." Then Moses, the servant of the Lord, died there in the land of Moab at the Lord's command. God was really serious about his punishment for Moses, who used the old command rather than the new command of God. He really died without entering the promised land. This story has very important lessons that we should learn for ourselves. Before we dig the golden nuggets out of the mistake of Moses, it is very helpful if we discuss first the reminders of Paul to the Corinthian Christians. In 1 Corinthians 10, verses 1 and 2, Paul wrote, "I do not want you to be unaware, brothers and sisters, that our ancestors were all under the cloud and all passed through the sea, and all were baptized into Moses in the cloud and in the sea." Paul reminded the Corinthian Christians of what happened to the Israelites when they left Egypt and after they crossed the Red Sea. It is because there is a tendency for Christians to do what the Israelites did after they crossed the Red Sea. We have to note that the Old Testament is not for us to keep, but for us to learn. There are so many parallelisms that exist between the Old Testament and the New Testament. According to Paul, the things in the Old Testament were just a shadow, but the reality is Christ, as we can read in Colossians 2, verses 16 to 17. Even the animal sacrifices in the Old Testament were just a shadow, but the reality is Christ, as we can read in Hebrews 10, verses 1 to 7. So, with these verses, we can say that there are many things that happened before Christ came that had some corresponding meaning in the New Testament times. For example, Egypt symbolizes sin that enslaves a sinner. We all know that sin enslaves a sinner. Even rich people can become poor if they are enslaved by their vices. They will even sell what they have until all their possessions are gone. Just as the Egyptians made the life of the Israelites difficult, sin also makes the life of sinners difficult. The Israelites were enslaved by the Egyptians, and the Israelites needed a deliverer to set them free, as we can read in Exodus 3, verses 7 to 11. The sinners are enslaved by sin, and they need also a deliverer to set them free, as we can read in Romans 6, verse 16. Paul wrote that we are either slave of sin or slave of righteousness, as we can read in Romans 6, verses 17 to 18. The Israelites were completely free from the Egyptians only after they crossed the Red Sea, as can be read in Exodus 14, verses 30 to 31. That crossing of the Red Sea symbolizes baptism because they were down at the bottom of the sea and they were covered by clouds, as can be read in 1 Corinthians 10, verse 2. But we have to remember that they were not saved yet from the Egyptians, not until they finished crossing the Red Sea. In the same way, a sinner is not yet saved from his or her sins, not until he or she gets out of the water during baptism, as can be read in many verses that I have shown in the screen. I hope you have seen some parallelisms already. We will see more of this later. I hope you are excited to know more about these parallelisms. This will certainly enhance our understanding of what is going on in the New Testament, and we will no longer complain why the Old Testament is still there when in fact we are under the New Testament now. I would like you to know that the more we understand the Old Testament, the more we appreciate the New Testament. Let us now study another parallelism. In 1 Corinthians 10, verse 3, we can read, "And all ate the same spiritual food." In order for them to reach the promised land after crossing the Red Sea, they had to eat the manna. If they would not eat it, they would die and could not reach the promised land. They only stopped eating this manna when they reached the promised land. In Joshua 5, verse 12, we can read, "The manna ceased on the day they ate the produce of the land, and the Israelites no longer had manna. They ate the crops of the land of Canaan that year." In the New Testament times, in order to reach heaven, our promised land, we have to eat the bread after we got baptized in water. We will be doing this until Christ comes again and take us to heaven, as we can read in 1 Thessalonians 4, verses 16 and 17. In 1 Corinthians 11, verse 26, we can read, "For as often as you eat this bread and drink the cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until he comes." Just like the Israelites, we will only stop eating the bread when we reach heaven, our promised land. In John 6, verses 31 and 32, the Jews said, "Our ancestors ate the manna in the wilderness, as it is written, He gave them bread from heaven to eat." Then Jesus said to them, "Very truly I tell you, it was not Moses who gave you the bread from heaven, but it is my Father who gives you the true bread from heaven." Clearly, the manna is the representation of the bread that we eat during the Lord's Supper. That bread symbolizes the body of Christ that was offered on the cross. Now, who was that Lord or Yahweh or Jehovah in the Old Testament times that spoke to Moses? According to Paul, he is no other than Christ himself. In 1 Corinthians 10, verse 4, Paul wrote, "And all drank the same spiritual drink, for they drank from the spiritual rock that followed them, and the rock was Christ." It was Christ that spoke to Moses, who told him that he would stand in front of them on the rock. The rock was Christ himself. In Exodus 17, verses 5 to 6, you can read, "The Lord said to Moses, Go on ahead of the people, and take some of the elders of Israel with you. Take in your hand the staff with which you struck the Nile, and go. I will be standing there in front of you on the rock at Horeb. Strike the rock, and water will come out of it, so that the people may drink." Moses did so in the sight of the elders of Israel. So Christ is not a man. He is Yahweh or Jehovah who was with Moses. In fact, in most cases it was Jesus Christ who spoke to Abraham, Isaac, etc., but they did not recognize him. That is why in John 1, verse 10, we can read, He was in the world, and the world came into being through him, yet the world did not know him. We still have another proof in a while. Can we see another parallelism? It was Christ who gave them water to drink so that they could reach the promised land. It was Christ who gave us his blood as true drink that will help us reach heaven, our promised land. In John 6, verses 54 and 55, Christ said, "Those who eat my flesh and drink my blood have eternal life, and I will raise them up on the last day. For my flesh is true food, and my blood is true drink." So we should not miss eating the bread and drinking the wine, so that we will reach heaven, our promised land. If we miss it, we will die spiritually and cannot reach heaven, our promised land. Let us continue studying the warnings of Paul to the early Christians. In 1 Corinthians 10, verse 5, Paul wrote, "Nevertheless, God was not pleased with most of them, and they were struck down in the wilderness." This is one of the warnings that Paul wrote to the Corinthian Christians. The Israelites were saved by God after crossing the Red Sea, but they did not reach the promised land because they kept on sinning against God. He provided them with manna so that they would not die and could reach the promised land. But they still complained against God and did many things contrary to God's will. This thing contradicts the teaching, once saved, always saved. In fact, Paul warned them because Christians were not eternally secure. If once saved, always saved is true, then there would be no New Testament books or letters. The New Testament books are filled with warnings. If Christians are eternally secure, then why warn them of the danger? We only warn those who are in danger. The reason why Paul warned them using the experience of the Israelites in the wilderness is that the same thing could happen to all Christians. Let us remember the parallelisms. Egypt symbolizes sin. Crossing the Red Sea symbolizes baptism. Being completely free from the pursuing Egyptians that enslaved the Israelites symbolizes being free from our sins that enslaved us. Eating the manna symbolizes eating the bread during Lord's Supper. Drinking water from the rock symbolizes drinking the wine during Lord's Supper. Canaan symbolizes heaven. Dying before reaching the promised land symbolizes spiritually dying before reaching heaven. In 1 Corinthians 10, verse 6, Paul warned, "Now these things occurred as examples for us, so that we might not desire evil as they did." I have mentioned this thing many times in my Bible studies, that the Old Testament is not for us to keep, but for us to learn. We should learn from the principles that we can read in the Old Testament times. This verse also tells us that there is no such thing as once saved, always saved. In 1 Corinthians 10, verses 7 and 8, Paul warned again, "Do not become idolaters as some of them did. As it is written, the people sat down to eat and drink, and they rose up to play. We must not indulge in sexual immorality, as some of them did, and 23,000 fell in a single day." These two Bible passages are real warnings. According to Paul, the Old Testament incidents were written as examples for us so that we will not do those things that they did. If once saved, always saved is true, then the Christians can tell Paul, "We are eternally secure, and it does not matter what we will do." Since once saved, always saved is not true, then the Christians are in danger if they desire evil things like idolatry, sexual immorality, etc. Let's avoid these things because we cannot reach heaven, our promised land, if we do them. Let us continue discovering Paul's warning to the Corinthian Christians. In 1 Corinthians 10, verse 9, Paul wrote, "We must not put Christ to the test, as some of them did, and were destroyed by serpents." This verse is interesting to note that Paul warned them not to put Christ to the test, as some of the Israelites tested Christ. If your translation uses him rather than Christ in 1 Corinthians 10, verse 9, rest be assured that I already checked the Greek word used. I checked it because him can mean either the Father or Christ, but the Greek word Christos was used by Paul. So it should be translated as Christ. Checking Exodus 17, verse 2, we can read, "The people quarreled with Moses and said, 'Give us water to drink.' Moses said to them, 'Why do you quarrel with me? Why do you test the Lord?'" I hope you still remember that it was shown earlier that the Lord, Yahweh, or Jehovah in Exodus 17 and Numbers 20 was Jesus Christ. The Israelites put Christ to the test. We can find the same thing in Exodus 17, verse 7, where we can read, "He called the place Massa and Meribah, because the Israelites quarreled and tested the Lord, saying, 'Is the Lord among us or not?' That is why Paul warned the Corinthian Christians not to put Christ to the test, just like what the Israelites did to him. Paul continued his warning to the Corinthian Christians. In 1 Corinthians 10, verse 10, Paul wrote, "And do not complain as some of them did, and were destroyed by the destroyer." This indicates the seriousness of spiritual danger that Christians might experience. We should learn from the Old Testament as to how God dealt with those who were saved by the Lord from the Egyptians before they reached the promised land. In 1 Corinthians 10, verse 11, Paul wrote, "These things happened to them as an example, and they have been written down as a warning to us, upon whom the end of the ages has come." According to Paul, the Old Testament incidents were written down as a warning to us. So let us learn from the Old Testament incidents. Then Paul warned those who think that they were eternally secure. In 1 Corinthians 10, verse 12, Paul wrote, "Therefore, whoever thinks he is standing secure should take care not to fall." The possibility of falling is real. Those who embrace the Calvinist doctrine, perseverance of the saints, or commonly known as once saved, always saved, teach that no Christian can fall. For them, if a Christian falls, he is not a Christian in the first place. This is absurd. How can you say that someone falls if he is not up somewhere, that is, not yet a Christian? If this year 2020 you are active in the church, they treat you as a Christian. But if you backslide in 2025, they will not treat you as a Christian in 2020. But Paul was clear in saying that all Christians can fall. Paul himself was very careful and tried his best not to fall. In 1 Corinthians 9, verses 24 and 25, Paul wrote, "Do you not know that the runners in the stadium all run in the race, but only one wins the prize? Run so as to win." Every athlete exercises discipline in every way. They do it to win a perishable crown, but we, an imperishable one. Here Paul was encouraging the Corinthian Christians to work hard to win an imperishable crown. Then in 1 Corinthians 9, verses 26 and 27, Paul wrote, "Thus I do not run aimlessly. I do not fight as if I were shadow boxing. No, I drive my body and train it, for fear that after having preached to others, I myself should be disqualified." He was afraid about the possibility of being disqualified. So if Apostle Paul, who was chosen by Christ himself, can be disqualified, are we better than Paul that we cannot be disqualified? So it is clear that Satan has managed to deceive many people into believing that they cannot be disqualified or they cannot fall from grace. Finally, after knowing the parallelisms, let us now dig the golden nuggets from the mistake of Moses. Let us start with the two commands. In Exodus 17, verse 6, the Lord said, "I will be standing there in front of you on the rock at Horeb. Strike the rock, and water will come out of it, so that the people may drink." Moses did so in the sight of the elders of Israel. The first command was to strike the rock. In Numbers 20, verse 8, the Lord said, "Take the staff and assemble the congregation, you and your brother Aaron, and command the rock before their eyes to yield its water. Thus you shall bring water out of the rock for them. Thus you shall provide drink for the congregation and their livestock." The second command was to command the rock. The old command was strike the rock, while the new command was command the rock. Is it not possible that these two commands represent the Old Testament and the New Testament respectively? They both came from God. Now, which is easier to do, striking the rock or commanding the rock? Of course, commanding the rock is easier to do than striking the rock. How about keeping the Old and the New Testaments? Which is easier to keep, the Old Testament or the New Testament? Of course, keeping the New Testament is easier than keeping the Old Testament. We already know that Moses and Aaron were not allowed to enter Canaan, their promised land, for keeping God's old command rather than the new command. What are the important lessons here? One of them is that if we keep the Old Testament rather than the New Testament, we will not be allowed to enter heaven, our promised land. We know that there are religious groups today that emphasize the keeping of the Old Testament, like worshiping on Sabbaths, not eating pork and fish without scales and fins, etc. Can they enter heaven someday? Another important lesson is obedience to what God says. We have to remember that Moses used God's old command, but God was not happy with it. Moses was not allowed to enter Canaan, their promised land, because of using God's old command. Moses did not use any command from men, But still, God was not happy with it. If God is not happy when we keep His old commands, how much more when we keep the commands from men or the doctrines of men? Let's learn from what God told Moses before he climbed the mountain and when he was already on the mountain. In Deuteronomy 32, verse 49, we can read, "Ascend this mountain of the Abarim, Mount Nebo, which is in the land of Moab across from Jericho, and view the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the Israelites for a possession." The purpose for instructing Moses to climb the mountain was to view the land of Canaan. In Deuteronomy 32, verse 52, we can read, "Although you may view the land from a distance, you shall not enter it, the land that I am giving to the Israelites." What could be the feeling of Moses when God told him only to view the land and not enter it? Maybe he was hoping that God would change his mind. In Deuteronomy 34, verse 4, we can read, "The Lord said to him, This is the land of which I swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, saying, I will give it to your descendants. I have let you see it with your eyes, but you shall not cross over there." This was God's final statement before Moses died. We can just imagine how Moses felt about it. Of course, Moses did not suffer eternally. He just died there on the mountain. As we have discussed earlier, the equivalent of the land of Canaan is heaven. How do we feel if God would only allow us to view heaven from a distance and afterwards we go to hell because we changed the words of God? We know that there is no other option aside from hell if we miss heaven. This will be the saddest thing to happen in our lives because the suffering in hell is eternal. Let me use a sample illustration to make this more vivid in our minds. Suppose there were four friends and all of them took the University of the Philippines College Admission Test or UPCAT. If two of them passed, of course, these two would be very, very happy. What about those who failed? If they see their two friends going in and out of the UP campus as students of UP, they will really envy their two friends. But in this example, the feeling is not as intense as seeing heaven on the way to hell. It is because, for one, there is no eternal suffering in this example. Another reason is that there are still other universities around providing quality education. But of course, they have to pay the expensive tuition fee. But seeing heaven from a distance before going to hell is really terrifying. It is because there are no other options to choose. So I hope we will learn from the mistake of Moses so that we can enter heaven and not hell. Let us avoid human doctrines. Let us not go back to the Old Testament and keep it. It is enough for us to learn the principles found in the Old Testament. It is enough for us to learn the parallelisms. This ends my series of videos for the lesson titled The Importance of God's Words. I do hope that this series of videos has helped you in some way. For those who were not able to watch the whole series, I hope you watch it starting from part 1. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you have learned some very important truth, and I hope that you will share this to your loved ones, friends, and acquaintances. I hope everyone will watch my next series of videos titled The Grace of God, How to Avail of It. I am inviting you to watch the videos. I believe there are still things that you can learn from the videos regardless of your religious and biblical background. Thank you very much again. May God bless us all.